What's up, y'all? It's Cousin Chet. Thanks for tuning in. Here with Dill again. What's up, Dill again? Excuse the relaxed fit today. I got called in early for work, and I didn't expect it, and I just kind of rushed in. So, as you said, what you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. Is that gonna be the title? What you see is what you get. So we were just talking about a topic, and one of my favorite topics is dating in the modern world. And I just saw a Facebook post somebody posted about we need to stop normalizing cheating. And
that would be nice.
You know, and I actually responded to that post. I was like, yeah, I just don't understand why people aren't honest about it. Like, here's something I find really funny. There are a lot of women that understand that men are different than women, specifically sexually. Like, our sexual needs, our sexual desires are different than women. And I'm going to use some broad strokes right here, but, overall, women, as I define them, which is biological females, tend to be much more emotionally engaged in the sexuality. Now, I'm not saying all, and there's definitely some women out there that can just, no strings attached and things like that. But whereas men are much more physical in the way that we experience and enjoy specifically our sexuality. And what I think is funny is that there are a lot of men out there that have side chicks or sugar mamas or sugar babies or mistresses or whatever have you. And what's funny is like, I feel like they, sorry, I just got distracted by a text that just came up on my screen. What was I saying?
You're saying lots of dudes tend to be...
Oh, they'll be honest with the side chick. Mm-hmm. Hey, I got a girl, I got a main chick at home, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, blah, 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 blah. And like, there's a lot of women out there like, cool, no, whatever, I understand. And they'll be honest with the side chick, but they won't be honest with their main chick. Mm-hmm. And so I guess where I'm trying to...
Makes it sound like there's more performance in having a state of like a monogamous relationship.
I think there's a lot of guys out there that are lying. Mm-hmm. That they feel like the only way to, maybe they want this woman for whatever reason, whether it's just like I have her or, I don't really understand it, honestly. But I feel like
the side chick seem to get it.
Yeah, the side chick gets it, but the main chick doesn't, right? Because she's like, oh, I'm not enough for you. You know what I mean? A lot of women are like, you should only need one woman be enough. Well, if that was the case, then why do so many men cheat? I mean, and I would posit that if we were able to get statistics, I would think that men cheat more than women. You think that's fair?
I don't necessarily buy it.
I'm listening.
I don't necessarily buy it because it seems to me that men are not... I think there's some natural causes to it, but men are cheaper than women.
Men are cheaper than women.
Yeah, technically that seems to be the case to me, because as a guy, you could potentially sire another child every day for a whole year. If you went out and had unprotected sex with 365 women, there's a chance you could have 365 kids next year. Right. That's just a reality. Women only have so much opportunity to have kids
Mm-hmm.
makes you that technically makes them more valuable.
I'm here.
Just
I
in the
understand that
sexual
point.
marketplace.
Mm-hmm. In the breeding marketplace.
Yeah, in the breeding marketplace.
I mean, which is related to our sexuality. You know, I get it, but I'm just.
Which, if you're talking about like the individual culture of your university or your city or your town, that's one thing. But when you're talking about building civilizations, the breeding kind of sets those. This isn't one of my key phrases, but the social norms, the direction of civilization has a way of co-opting sexual norms, and that's just when I say like men are naturally cheaper than women, that's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's really no way to slice it. if you're trying to kingdom build, if you're trying to build a civilization, if you're trying to guide a culture in some genuinely progressive direction, that's a reality you got to contend with. So it's, you know, I think we lie. I think Jordan Peterson's right. I think we lie to women all the way up until they graduate college.
So, open that up for me.
I think he's right when he says we lie to girls all the way up to college, where this might not have been true for you through grade school and high school, but
Are you calling me old?
I'm saying shit's been changing real quick.
I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. Go. No, I'm teasing.
Quick.
Go ahead.
But no, the big lie is, well, no, like you're gonna find your ultimate fulfillment in your career or your job or an occupation, and that's where you should put most of your eggs, so to speak. You should be putting your eggs in this basket of build up a resume, build up a career rap sheet, you know, have an exciting life dictated by being proficient at something.
I think I heard Jordan say, I think I heard Dr. Peterson say that the lie is that the career is your most important thing. And he actually says it like three different ways. I saw a clip of him saying there's three big lies that we tell women, and they were all related to this idea that the career is your most important thing. Your focus in your younger life should be on your career. That the value and purpose of just being a mother is not the true value of a person, and that your value is a career. I don't remember exactly how he breaks it down because he kind of says it in a chronological, formal way.
The best lies have a kernel of truth to them, and the kernel of truth there is anybody can have a kid.
I can't. I don't have a uterus.
But I mean, anybody can make a kid.
Oh, okay.
You fucking cheeky bastard. But
Just saying, I don't have a uterus.
But anybody can make a kid, so it's like, oh, well, don't be like everybody else, you know, set yourself apart. And then I've seen it, and then, you know, fast forward 4 or 5 years, and that same girl. I'm getting into the anecdotes, but from my personal experience, the girls who buy that hook, line, and sinker, fast forward 3 or 4 years from the point where they really get that sort of validation of, you need to be focused on your career, like you can sleep around, like sow your wild oats, it's natural. Those girls tend to end up with technicolored hair, from what I've noticed. Like, again,
Technicolor hair.
you know what? I will stereotype today. I didn't get my coffee. I'll do what I want.
I'm too tired to filter my thoughts for ye.
Yeah. But I don't know. It just, I've started to notice it like in my day to day, like where it's not just, oh, I saw like a YouTube video where somebody was talking about stats and the modern world. I've started noticing it in my day to day. A lot of women who are like, and not old women. I'm talking like girls in their 20s, starting. I've started to notice like this constant air of dissatisfaction.
From who? To who? With who? With what?
Women, young girls, not even, I'm trying to figure out how to say it. It's like, it's almost like I suspect it's more with, well, I'm kind of, I'm not, I've had a few conversations, interactions, experiences with, I guess, some Zoomer girls.
Zoomer?
Yeah, like early 20s. Like just, I don't know if girls were always like that, but it seems like when I was in my early 20s, there wasn't this like kind of like desperation, like this searching. I guess there's one person in particular I'm thinking of, but like, I'm getting a little lost in the weeds without my caffeine, but like, let me ask you a question. Like, do you think there's what do you think of body counts? You think it matters?
Yeah. I mean, I think it matters to different people in different ways. I definitely have heard. So I'm back up a little bit because you've heard of like, you've mentioned Dr. Jordan Peterson, and you've heard of Kevin Samuels.
I have not.
Kevin Samuels is a black man. He actually died last year. He died like right after I started noticing him because he started coming across like YouTube feeds with shorts and stuff like that. But I guess he was like an image consultant, and he became really popular on YouTube for kind of like telling them to him straight, right? And he'd have women, and he was always discussed what he called high value men, which is apparently a man that makes like $10,000 a month or more. Which is only like 2 to 3% of the population. Like most people don't make that, right? But part of his thing is like many, and he was kind of focused on the black community and black culture. But I think many of the things that he said apply across the board. Like you could take the color, the hue of skin out of the equation in a lot of cases, and so he would discuss with women. He would be like, look, you're talking about like this small percentage of the population and you want to be attracted, but these are the kinds of women that they're attracted to. And they're not attracted to the woman that is independent, boss, super masculine in the way that she interacts with the world, right? He doesn't care about how educated she is. You know what I mean? Like he's more concerned of, can she support me as a wife? Can she be a good mother? Is she loyal, dedicated, and will she stay? Kind of thing, right? That's what men, according to Kevin Samuels, that's what high value men, these men that make $120,000 a year or more, are interested in. Now, I don't agree with everything he said, but I've noticed that after he passed away, there have been other people to kind of pick up the mantle. One of the most famous ones is right now is Andrew Tate. he's an asshole. But anyway,
Shouldn't be in jail if you ask
no,
me.
and look, I don't like assholes. I think he's an asshole, but I don't think he's wrong either. I think there's a lot of things that he says that are absolutely right. I think that we have really kind of tried to, our society for some reason, really just trying to mush down on anything masculine. Like, if you're a man, you're bad, so to speak. Like, open, doing the man spread, right? Oh, that's okay. I understand you don't like it. This is what men do to create their space. It's also because we got to create space for the family jewels. You don't have danglers hanging there. You can't cross. If you crossing your legs, you squishing your danglers, man. So like I'm gonna sit like that with my, you know what I mean? Because I want to be comfortable. And I want to create my space. That's one thing that men do, right? We create our space. This is my bubble, right? Let me sit here, create my space, create my bubble. Let me own my space. Let me dominate my space. Let me assert myself into my space. That's what men do, yeah?
As if Bill Gates and George Soros weren't working hard enough to lower my sperm count as it is.
So anyway, but it's been very interesting. So one of them is Pearly Things, who I don't know where she's from, but she's like a female who is trying to say, like, my version of feminism is to be a more traditional woman, is her, right? And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she seems to have picked up that mantle. And I hear her quoting things that Kevin Samuel has said, that I've heard Kevin Samuel say. For one, Kevin Samuel had repeated a statistic that 70% of divorces are filed by women. Now, we might want to look into that stat, but when you look at it at its face and you say, oh my gosh, 70% of the time, the woman leaves the marriage.
I thought you said 40 for a second. I was like, that doesn't sound right.
70. That's the stat that Kevin Samuels used. I don't even know where he got it from. I've heard other people like Sneeko and Pearly Things and other people like use this stat. So, I don't know where they got it from. I think they got it from Kevin Samuels. I'm not sure where Kevin got it from. It seems legit. Sorry, I'm not out here verifying everything.
Checks out with anecdotally.
Yeah. And then he goes on to say that if they're college educated, 90%.
Doesn't surprise me.
And so so what this does is it leads to this conversation of why is it worth it for a man to take the risk of marrying somebody when the risk is all his? She's most likely, if she leaves, she's going to take the kids. And then she's going to take some of his money. And if the average marriage in the United States is 7 to 8 years, why does a man want to invest all that in a marriage when she's going to leave, she's going to take the kids, and she's going to take some of his check? And what man really, truly wants to have children that are living somewhere else? And he gets every other weekend or every other holiday. And he's got to see it as a bill on his check. This come out of my check today, And yeah, the money's supposed to be going to take care of the kids, but we all know it's helping her pay the rent too. Like, let's not be naive about it. There are women out there that are living based on support checks and the funding of their baby daddy, right? It's almost well worth it for her. Let me go get this nice guy that works good, have kids with him. I can leave him. He can start sending me checks, and I can let other men take care of me too. You know what I mean? And so, and then we have one thing that Kevin Samuel says as well, which is, women will have kids with the guy that just has good genes. He's tall, dark, and handsome, blah, 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 but he's not husband material, right? I think Kevin Samuel says something like, the majority of women, he's referring to the black community, but he says the majority of children in the black community belong to like 20% of the men. There's like 80% of the men that the women don't even really pay attention to. They're all fucking the same guy. They're all, and it's these players, right? The Nick Cannons of the world or whatever, you know? And now, so I'm going to get back to, you know, what's the risk? For the woman, there's not a lot of risk. You could end up with a deadbeat, but the government's still going to send you some money. Somebody's still going to take care of you if you want them to, you know? Now, on the flip side of that is, on the other side of that, going on to after she's left that first guy, whether she married him or not, you know, now she's got a couple kids, and she expects some guy that's making $10,000 a month to want to choose her over a younger woman that hasn't given up the most valuable thing. This is Kevin Samuel's words. The most valuable thing that you can give, which is a man. You can give a man a child. You've already given that to somebody. And from my perspective, I've dated women with children. I had a stepfather growing up most of my life. And the way I look at it at this point, I don't want to date. I don't have children, and I don't want to date women with children because I'm dating for potential of like partnership. And I don't want, let me break this down a little bit. When there is a child in that relationship that doesn't belong to the man, the child becomes an arbiter of what is happening, whether people like it or not. Because the structure goes woman here, child here, man here. If these two are not belonging to each other, she's going to default to him almost all the time. She's going to default to the child.
Yeah.
If she's a good mother.
Yeah.
That's what a good mother would do.
I was going to say, if she's somebody you can respect.
Right. If she's a good mother, she's going to default to the child a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. She's going to make sure that he's taken care of. She's not going to let this dude mess that up, so to speak, right? The other part is whether or not the child's father is in their life or not, you now have another man that's involved in your relationship. Now, if he's not involved at all, he's involved in the fact that this child is going to be missing their father. They're missing their biological father. There are things that DNA needs to respond to through nature to be raised, in my opinion, to be raised properly. And if you don't have that father, you don't know who you are, right?
Yeah.
You don't really know who you are. You've got missing pieces, so to speak. Yeah. Because there's information that's been passed down generation to generation to generation. There are behaviors, there are tics, there are attitudes, you know what I mean? And if you don't understand them, if you don't know where they come from, it's much easier to navigate that.
There's a big biological hurdle to jump if you're not the biological father.
Yeah, and if he is, if that baby daddy is involved in the life, right? Well, now you got another man in your relationship who's making decisions for your family, right? Because if he's like, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. So now you got your girl arguing with some other dude about your family. You know what I mean? Again, I've dated several women with children before. I was a child. I had a stepfather the majority of my childhood. Yeah. And that's a reality people want to ignore. So women are like on Kevin Samuel's show, she'd be like, I don't understand why a high value man, you know, and Kevin Samuel would say, well, you got 2 kids. She's like, that's it? Just 2 kids? He's like, that's it. He's like, that's the whole thing, ladies.
Yeah.
Because let's back up to something Chet is going to say repeatedly on these podcasts. In my experience, everybody wants to know what the purpose of life is. The purpose of life is to continue life. It's to make life better for the next generation. It's been happening since the single-cell organisms were floating around in the murky murk billions and billions of years ago. In a billion years, what kind of car you drove, what kind of house you lived in, what kind of belt you wore, what brands you put on your body, none of that's going to matter. None of it will matter. None of it. Unless you're Albert Einstein, Jesus, or Buddha, most likely you're not going to be recorded in the pages of history. Nobody's going to pay attention to you. If you look around, look at what happens when somebody dies and look at how long it takes before most people are just going on with their life. They're not even really, you know, they got them in. I got my dad in the back of my head. You know what I mean? But was 2-3 generations, there's nobody going to remember him. Unless we write it down, unless we're like the Jewish people that, you know, wrote their history down kind of thing. You know, that's why we remember Abraham and think. You understand what I'm saying? So for me, the purpose of life is that generation. It is our purpose is to breed, and for people like me that don't have children, therefore my purpose is to still help the next generation, right? To talk, to teach, to share my wisdom, right? I still got love in my heart, even if I don't have my own children to give it to. I have a responsibility to this world to create less suffering, or at least not add to the suffering that's already going to be happening, because life is suffering, right? Life is hard. Life is challenging, right? So I don't want to make it any more challenging for anybody that I come in contact to. I'm trying to put deposits in my karma bank, not withdrawals. You understand? And so, but at the end of the day, so there was the program your mom worked with, and I was a mentor coordinator under that program. There was this series that we used, and I don't remember the name, but when I listened to the introduction, there was a woman that talks about how she got pregnant, and after she had her child, a couple years later, like, she felt like, what am I doing with my life? Like, she's like, I don't understand what my purpose is. And then she goes on to give this program that teaches people how to find their purpose through a career.
Yeah.
It's not about who you are, it's about what you do.
So
right?
I'm not crazy is what you're saying.
Who?
Me.
I'm saying you're not crazy?
Yeah, what I say, I feel like we've sold this safe
Yeah. I'm supporting that idea that we're telling women and look, there's some validity to the equality movement of females, right? No female should have to be in an economic slave situation where she's being oppressed and abused because of economic circumstances, that she's with the man and she can't, like it used to be, like a woman, like she couldn't go get a job type of thing, And so she was kind of, she might be stuck in a marriage or something like that with an abusive husband. I get that. I have no problem with empowering women to say, you know what, you are not less than. Yeah. But we have to look at the structures of civilization, as you mentioned, and the idea of our long-term purpose, right? So many people are, I want to be happy in my life. Well, your happiness is really creating a lot of suffering for somebody else. Those diamonds that you're wearing, you can thank some slaves in Africa for digging those up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that cell phone you're using, all these fancy clothes, you can thank all these slave labor, really oppressed people that are getting paid nada to make that crap for you. And then somebody puts their brand on it and you pay for the brand. You're not paying for the labor. You're not paying for the work. You're paying simply for a brand, So anyway, I'm getting off topic. What I want to stay on is this idea that, so this woman talks about how depressed she is because she doesn't have her purpose. And I'm like, that is so sad to me. No wonder these kids out here don't feel loved. No wonder they're just willing to walk into a store and start pop, 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 pop. Because they got no love. They got no attachment, man. They're being raised by peers, teachers, nannies, And even if, I have conversations with women about being a career wife or being a stay-at-home mom. And a lot of them be like, oh, you can balance it. I can do both. And I'm thinking, how? How can you do both? How can you possibly give that child the attention they need when all you have is 4 hours on the weekday evenings? And you come home tired from work, and your husband tired from work, stressed out from a day at work, and you think you got the energy to love, teach your children? Some of you may be Wonder Women, but not all of you, right? That goes for the same for men. Yeah. Now, one thing we could do as women, this is another thing that Kevin Samuels and Just Pearly Things talks about, or I take from them, is women want men to stay traditional. See, they want to change their role and they want to change everything they're doing through feminism, but men, first of all, are toxic just by being men. And second of all, they still want us to be traditional, right? How many feminists want to pay for dinner when they go out to dinner on a date? None. They all want the man to pay. How many feminists want a man that's going to talk to them first and approach them first?
Most of them.
Yeah, that's the rule, right? Like, men have to be the one to approach. But now you got to be scared because now you're fucking sexually assaulting. You're harassing me.
They want to be on the same. They want the playing field to be even, and they're only interested in the guys who still game the system with an even playing.
I wouldn't say. I would say they want their cake and eat it too kind of scenario, right? They want to take all the good things from the tradition, all the things that benefit them, like being able to go to a club on a Friday night with only $5 in your pocket. Name a man that can do that. A man can't go to the club, get in for free, buy himself one drink, and then find somebody to buy him drinks for the rest of the night. Not gonna happen. I mean, rarely, you know what I mean?
Well, and it's
unless
funny.
You just pimp diddly.
It's funny you say that. That seems like women want, well, not women. I'll say feminist women. They want to change the norms, the social standards for themselves, but they kind of want that same. They want that old school, old world traditionalism in the guys.
In the comments, for any woman that happens to watch this, since you want to be a career woman, are you willing for your husband to be a stay-at-home parent?
I don't think so. I doubt it.
How many women do you think? I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be absolutely zero. Because you know what else is the biggest predictor of divorce? A woman that makes more money than her husband.
Yep.
The biggest predictor of divorce is a woman that makes more money than her husband.
I don't know how it scales, but you know what another runner-up is?
Hold on, let me finish this thought real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because if he's not being that traditional male, there's something in her that she loses respect for him.
Yeah.
So the longer he stays at home and is that good man that they say they want in writing, no. Biologically, mentally, they don't. They don't want that. And especially if we're talking about like high value situations, right? And I don't think we need to talk about that because that's like 2-3% of the population. It's like the same numbers of transsexuals in the world, right? There's a very small percentage of the population that is experiencing that specific experience, right? In that context. The same thing goes for people that are making over $10,000 a month. If you look around the world, you've got a very small percentage of people that are making that. Most of us are much more common. But with the internet, we live in that world. We live in those values because we've been told, well, you have to manifest, you have to tell yourself that you're already there, you know, the secret, laws of affirmation, all that jazz, right? I apologize. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, first thing I was going to say was, it's ironic that feminist women still have this expectation. They have some degree of expectation that any man they end up with is going to remain traditional. At the very beginning, we were saying how what are those high value men crave?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of traditionally oriented women.
Yeah.
You know, I remember Tim Dillon talking about how he did a gig. Like, he did a gig in Romania and Andrew Tate showed up and he was like, hey, I'll talk to Andrew Tate, see what's on his mind. I remember Tim Dillon saying how, like, he was, like, surrounded by these women. They were quiet. They were very unexpressive. They were very they were like, he had this entourage of just quiet Romanian girls, just kind of almost like always in the background.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, they didn't say much. They kind of like didn't make eye contact with that many people, and they were very introverted. That's my word. He seemed like he was describing some very introverted women. And then he follows it up by saying, coming from America, it's kind of a nice change of pace. Now, the thing is like, Let me drop a little. Let me drop a little anthropology for a second. Let me get real nerdy for a minute.
Let's go.
You ever heard of Eric Neumann?
No.
He's a guy who he takes after kind of the Jungian school of thought. He was a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote this book called The Great Mother, where he's exploring specifically woman as an archetype. Like you like there's all kinds of goddesses and priestesses to draw from. Anyways, he's one of these comparative religion guys who's cross-referencing all of these world mythologies,
Mm-hmm.
and he's trying to extract out what is it that man admires so much about women that we've commemorated the female form in these gigantic Greek statues, these Roman statues, all of these mythologies about Aphrodite and Hera and Kali and
Mm-hmm.
and this is a really interesting rabbit hole to go down if you're interested in studying like the origins of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
But I come to find out, I only ever remembered reading this from Neumann's book, but I've come to find out in the last year or so, it's not just Neumann's idea. This is a pretty. It's kind of like all the stuff Graham Hancock talks about, where it's like Graham Hancock isn't necessarily the guy like who has all the context about the ancient world, but he's the journalist that goes around and interviews all of the rogue archaeologists, all the anthropologists that don't make it to your university-sponsored conference.
Mm-hmm.
They're not on the university panels. They're out in the field, like really trying to figure out, okay, where do we come from?
Mm-hmm.
But in that book, The Great Mother, Neumann points out that there's this. I guess it's still in the domain of theory, but there's this comparative religious archaeological reading that suspects that, like, okay, where does patriarchy come from? Patriarchy comes from the past, vaguely speaking. It seems like most societies to living memory have the ones that end up colonizing and imperializing and then reforming, and then kind of all of these kingmaker civilizations tend to have been patriarchies to living memory.
I think that's mostly because for most of life, if I can kick your ass, I can make the rules. And I mean, it still persists today in a lot of forms, but, you know, when it comes to civilization and when it comes to people and how we formed our societies, it comes from, I can kick your ass, so therefore I make the rules.
Well, Neumann has this theory that I originally came across in his book, The Great Mother. He suspected that a lot of what this cross analysis led him to believe is that once upon a time in the prehistoric past, he thought that women figured out where babies come from before the men did. And like early evolutionary roots, he had the suspicion that women figured, they established the correlation of, yeah, I have sex with this guy, and then over a period of a few months, I start to notice something internally is happening. Fast forward another few months, obviously something's happening.
Yeah.
and then in 9 months there's a new human being.
So you're saying like the caveman, he's like, damn, babe's getting fat, and she's like, oh, I'm pregnant. I've got this baby happening.
Yeah. Well, and his suspicion was that
I'm playing off the idea that, you know, women figured it out first. So the guy's just going, damn, she's getting fat. Whereas the woman's like, oh, we had sex a couple months ago, and I've got one in the oven. They didn't use the word oven because it's on the cooker.
Well, it's like if you're living in kind of a more tribalistic situation, it's like everybody's trying to get food and eat and survive, and it's like you kind of see the animals, like they kind of roughly, like they'll have sex, but it's like they produce a baby in like a few months, and it's like, anyways, his point is like if you completely wipe the slate clean and you only had a few human beings who had no context for any other human beings that came before them, it would probably take, and it was just out in the wilderness, it's just the wild jungle out there, it would take some time for somebody to establish that correlation. And you know, his point is he has this reading that originally it was a secret that women kept between themselves. And like I said, this isn't just one man's theory, I've come to find out.
Well, right now, he sounds like he thinks his people are fucking ignorant. But anyway, go ahead. I don't think that men are running around going, oh my God, where the babies come from? Who's the stork? I mean, I think intelligent men at whatever level, even if it was a million years ago, recognize that animals are having sex and they have gestation periods. You know what I mean? Like, even if they got dogs around, they've got horses around or whatever, they know that they're breeding those dogs. Like, this idea that people don't know where babies come from just seems like really ludicrous to me. Like, unless we're talking about like pre-humans, and even at that, I think even animals oftentimes know where babies come from.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard any of those myths about Zeus showing up in a golden mist and impregnating a woman?
Yeah, it's very common in Greek culture that Zeus or the gods would impregnate.
Not even in Greek culture. Like, the idea of the virgin birth is very, very much Persian.
Yeah, but even, I mean, we're talking about Persia, Greece. There's a lot of mixing because they kept taking over each other's areas. So, you know, whether we're talking about the Hellenistic Mount Olympus or we're talking about the Zoroastrian Persians, this idea that when somebody was special, it was just part of the legend that you would put on them that they must have been fathered by a god. Right? That's why they're so special. And that was how they would signify that they're special. Whether we're talking about Achilles or Hercules or Jesus, right? Osiris or any of these people. You know, there's this way of like, it's like qualifying someone to be special, to be elite, to be this like figure that is a step above humanity. Again, Hercules, Achilles, Jesus, right? There's this very common like, and it comes from just the way we tell our stories and things like that. You know, when a reality becomes a legend, then it becomes a myth. And so, go ahead, but we're bringing that up in support of.
That's my point. Is that okay? What I just said. There's this ancient prehistoric meme, if you would, of the gods, you know, sort of appearing, almost appearing in disguise and impregnating women.
It's in the story of Abraham too, right? There's these gods that just show up. They don't impregnate anybody, but they're talking about, you know, this promise that God makes to Abraham and Sarah that she's going to get pregnant at a very old age, right? And then, like, part of that story is these gods that come shaped like men. Go ahead.
Well, One of the reasons for one of his suspicions about this arose, as far as I'm aware, from realizing that like there's a line almost between prehistoric artifacts you dig up where it's almost exclusively female imagery. Like it's almost exclusively like I think it's supposed to be one of the oldest, probably not anymore, but it was like one of the oldest archaeological examples of art that's ever existed. It's a very overweight woman. It's a little stone carving. You know
She's super curvy. Yeah,
She's very curvy.
I think it's called the Mother of Fertility or the Fertility Goddess or something like that. I think I've seen it before. She doesn't like. I don't even think the statue has a head anymore. And she's very kind of like shaped like this.
Yeah.
Right, because she's got a very big midsection,
Yeah.
and her legs and thighs are thick, but then it kind of tapers down.
Yeah. She looks like she's sired of you.
Yeah, and she's like the mother of fertility or the fertility goddess, I think, is what they call that statue.
Yeah. Well, there's this weird line. There's on the timeline. There's this separation between when you have exclusively like benefactor like goddesses and deities, and you have lots of I think it's Ashtoreth and Ishtars and Newts. There's some point in the prehistoric timeline where it's like you suddenly start getting Athenas and Kalis and Medusas. It's almost like in the grand scheme of in the timeline that stands to be observed, like from the deep historical past, there's almost like this. It's almost like there's like this separation between the era of human beings were almost exclusively exonerating and kind of mystifying like the female form, and then there's a hard transition over to these depictions of these bloodthirsty, villainous female goddesses that are the true arbiters of chaos.
Like Lilith.
Like Lilith, yeah. But there's, at any rate, I'll get off that subject.
I'm trying to like we've been on this tangent for a while, but I'm trying to figure out where it's connecting to the.
But the thinking is that like, well, patriarchy didn't just like that's not just the way it's. Yes, patriarchy does exist. It is like almost like a sort of template for community or society building. But there's some reason to think, in my opinion, that it's not as simple as, oh, well, we eventually started walking upright. We started figuring out how to sharpen sticks, and then all the guys got together and were like, hey, we could, like, really run shit if we can just domesticate these women around us. Like, that wasn't a thought that just... That thought has its roots in a much more mixed past, it seems to me anyway. To me anyway, it kind of looks like there's been this animosity between men and women vying for control over social norms, if you will. But it seems like it's embedded in the nature of the conflict is women controlling information and using information as a weapon, and men really like having real strong emotional reactions to that. Like that seems to be as rooted in our evolutionary history as the nature of that conflict is from the beginning. Men have had this sort of degree of separation by virtue of we're cheaper. Like we have like what we're cheaper, so it's like in order to be a high value man, you know, how many fucking rocks have you stepped over in your life? You couldn't even count. It takes a really shiny, really pretty, really fucking impressive rock to make you pay attention to a rock.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a really pronounced, unique rock. I think that's kind of put this sort of hypertension on men to a certain degree. And I think that there's always been a top 20% that has been skewing that to its advantage. Now I'm describing the pitfalls of this like patriarchal thinking for men.
Yeah.
Like it hasn't necessarily benefited the other 80% all that time either. As far as I'm aware, you have 2 female ancestors for every male ancestor that you have, statistically on average. You haven't heard that before?
No.
Yeah.
How can I have 2 female for every male? Takes one man, one woman.
It takes one man and one woman. But most of your male ancestors never had kids. All of your great uncles, they stack up to like they stack up probably to here.
So I'm gonna try to bring it. I want to try to reconnect to dating in the modern world, modern relationships.
Yeah.
So the information that you just gave us, how are you relating that to the modern context?
Because it's the same conflict.
The conflict.
Men have the threat of physical violence, and that has to be accounted for. And it's accounted for, and women seem to have this tendency of skewing information, holding information.
And so in the modern context, I mean, they're taking, our brute force is being taken away from us, right? That part of masculinity is, domestic violence.
Who uses all the social media? And I'm not trying to woman bash. I'm saying that like I don't think this conflict that's coming about is working out for girls either.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about like it's a conflict of power,
I think we would all benefit from edging away from that.
Using that information so say you have a son, right? And he's high school age, he's getting ready to start dating. What are you going to teach him? What are you going to guide him? And maybe I'm doing it wrong because you're young enough that it's like, okay, so how do you use this information as you navigate forward, right? In your goals. So let me, do you want a family at some point?
Yeah.
And so you want a family that is a child and a mother in the house, right? Not a child and a mother in somebody else's house. To make that clear. And so if that's the goal and you're looking at this information and you're like, okay, this is what I want, and here's one of the challenges of reaching that goal, right? There's all the statistics that I so passionately spoke about earlier. I realized I was getting all amped up. I was like, because real quick, it's killing the family, and that's one reason I want to bring this to us, because this current conflict and this current lack of marriage and people staying and finances and the power struggle, it really does. I feel that's part of it, right? Because what happens when you take away the brute force? Now you have economic force, right? That's the current force that's mostly used in the world today. Like violence is the last resort, right? Even when we go into war, it's like, well, we got to have a really good reason to go to war because we don't really want to do violence. We much rather politically, handle it. And before we go resort to physical violence, as a country, we're using economic sanctions and shit like that, right? Economic pain compliance, whether it's to force people to get a vaccine and wear a mask, or just to force Putin to try to pull out of Ukraine, right? Like macro, micro, I don't care where you're at. Economic pain compliance is one of the major ways of exerting force, exerting power. And in a household, that power oftentimes, at one point it was I can beat you, so mind me, do what I say, mind your P's and Q's, walk whatever. And then as time went on, we get to a little bit more evolution. We realize, maybe we shouldn't be beating on our women so much. We can start to protect them. And I don't think it's perfect, but we're working on that. And I think it's important. I don't think any woman should have to be in a relationship where she's abused. So, but we get to a point where we're in a current culture now where women are just as much as the workforce as men. Mm-hmm. So we take away the power that the traditional male, and when I say the traditional male, I'm talking about industrialized man. I'm talking about like the last couple 100 years. Like before that, it was a completely, like it wasn't economic. It really was down to brute strength, and I can provide, I can protect, I can go out, I can hunt, I can protect you and our family, and you need that. Oh, by the way, because it's really hard for a 9-month-old woman to protect, 9-month pregnant woman to protect herself. And it's really hard for her to protect if she's got 2 young children. Yeah. So, it was nice to have this brutish fucking man around that could get angry and exert violence. So anyway, but we come into the modern context, in a modern world that's not so reliant on brute force, but more reliant on what? Information. Which you said anthropologically, that, this has been the power of women, is the power of information. Yeah. So if I'm running with that, we're working in the information world. We almost might want to consider this the information revolution that's happening right now. I think, in many modern context and business, and especially in, tracking all the data and doing all that, I think women tend to be a little bit better multitaskers. That's a much more favorable thing to have in a modern context, in my opinion. And so now we have this power shift, right? Because for one, women don't need a man that's making money. She can make her own, right? And a lot of women are being taught that. Go make your own money. Yeah. You don't need a man. Make your own money. The only thing women really need a man for right now is sperm donors. Like, other than the fact that they recognize I can get this thirsty dummy to go work for me.
I caught myself because I was about to say.
If you're about to say it, you didn't catch yourself. Go ahead.
I was about to, I'm going to qualify it though. I was about to say, yeah, that's the way it was for the last 40, 50 years. Mm-hmm. And now we're headed towards such an enormous recession, worldwide recession. Yeah. And inflation is skyrocketing to the point where it's like, well, yeah, you can make your own money living as a single individual person.
It's a lot harder.
You're gonna find yourself stuck in a wage slave situation, though. It's inevitable.
And what are you gonna do? Drive your steel box
On the other hand, though, that's the criticism of that. That's the old criticism of the welfare system, though, is, well, doesn't it incentivize women to avoid having any? That's the conservative.
I want to say Thomas Sowell says that. He's like, and maybe it was Dr. Peterson who said, women, the government was like, I'll be your husband. Mm-hmm. I'll take care of you. I'll give you food and shelter. Mm-hmm. And then women, but even at that, I mean, we're in such a modern context now with the current workforce, and women are I think much more likely to succeed in college, to get college educated.
I'd be surprised if Thomas Sowell doesn't mention this either. But when we entered women into the workforce, it gave our economy a huge boost because there was
more productivity.
Yeah, there's more workers.
And guess what? Labor's cheaper because you got more of it. Mm-hmm. See, that's one thing I think about. Like, women are like, no, I want a man that's like out here and he's making more money than me. I'm like, do you realize that when the women entered the workforce, you took the jobs and the wealth away?
Mm-hmm.
You lowered the amount of money that men can make.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you added half of the world's population into the workforce that wasn't there before, and therefore you made the bankers very happy. The bankers are very happy. They love current society. You know why? Because current society feeds their pockets. How does it do that? Well, for one, it makes labor cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like big time. Labor is much cheaper. Anyway, I want to get back to my idea that, this idea that women want to like have their cake and eat it too. So they want to change their roles, but the only way they want men to change their roles necessarily is just to be less violent. But they still want us to kill the bugs. You know what I mean? They still want us to like reach the cabinets, to lift the heavy shit. You know what I mean? Like they still want us to do, and oh, by the way, there's not one woman out there that's like, yeah, sign me up for the draft. I want to be equal. Let me sign up for the selective service when I turn 18.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get passionate and like, this is actually, I mean, I've been feeling this angst like most of my life. This is one of the reasons why I'm single. Because when I come out of the house and I was looking at the previous generation, I saw a bunch of every other weekend dads. And I saw the heartbreak that men had when women took their children away. And then they called them deadbeat men, when really they're just heartbroken men. And it's easier to ignore pain for a man than it is to just, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't want to deal with that pain. I got to focus on what I'm focused on. I don't deal with the pain. I don't focus on the pain. So I just cut it out of my brain. That's what men do. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just the way it is. We can live in a world that is reality, or we can live in the world that we think is, but I'm sorry. We have to recognize that there's the world that we want to live in, and then there's the world that we actually live in. And there's nothing wrong with trying to create the world to be better, but you still have to recognize the world for what it is. And so what I saw was heartbroken men. And I saw men that recognized, like, damn, the risk is not worth the reward anymore. Why should I invest in this woman when in 7 to 10 years she's going to leave and take my children with her? And the court systems were nothing but supportive of that. When I was growing up, it was very unheard of for a man to win a court case against a woman in a divorce for custody. Very unheard of. And so I saw that. And I'm like, why do I want to? And I did get married. Luckily, I got married to somebody that was so bad that she did up before we had kids. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for being the succubus that you are and not having children with me. And I'm so glad that I didn't have to deal with that woman in that context for the rest of my life. Because that's the trick, right? It is the rest of your life. That child support might be till they're 18. But once you have a child with somebody, if you don't have children, you get a divorce all day long. You have children with somebody, you might be able to divorce them legally, but you're still in a relationship with that person. And if you're not, you're fucking it up for your kids. If you can't be an adult and have a relationship with your baby mama or baby daddy, and you can't be cool and cordial and work together to do what's best for the child, not for your egos, not for whatever kind of games you want to play. If it's really for the child, you need to be partners in raising that child. So you might as well just consider you're in a polyamorous relationship, even if you got other men around. You know what I mean? Because that man, the father of your child, the woman of your child is still part of your life, or should be.
Well, it's like, I don't...
For this, because again, at the beginning I say, our purpose is to do what?
It's to breed.
It's to breed. Our purpose is to create the next generation, raise the next generation, and make the world a better place for the next generation. Just like everybody did for us. All those people that were hunting and collecting berries and doing the hunter-gatherer thing and fighting saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths, and you know what I mean? All the people that went through the Genghis Khan and slavery, and you talking about recessions, man. I can't. Recession's a little bit different than the potato famine. Like I don't know. Maybe it's kind of the same thing, but you know, you're talking about people starving to death, man. You know what I mean? You're talking about an older world, and there's so many thoughts running through my brain right now, man, because there's so many connections. There's so many intersectional situations and contexts and things that have molded and shaped the situation that we're in right now. But we're killing our families, and we're the generations that we're raising right now. We're not raising them with love and attachment. They're being raised by video games. They're being raised by children cartoons on YouTube, on the TV. They're being raised by preschool teachers. I don't know if you noticed, and I'm not trying to knock no preschool teacher, but they're not the most educated. They're not the most motherly. I mean, some of them can be, but you know, we're not paying the best and brightest of the crop to raise our kids. And then they're being raised by schools. Again, we're not paying for the best and brightest to raise our kids. And who wants their kid to be raised by a woman or a man in a classroom that's dealing with 20 to 30 kids at a time? How can these children possibly get the attention they need? And then they come home and they've got two tired and stressed out parents. If they're lucky to still have two parents at home. Remember, average marriages lasted 7 to 8 years. So we're talking about this kid, 7, 8, how old are you at 7 or 8 years old? I'm sorry, not how old are you? What grade are you in?
I think you're like second, third grade.
Second or third grade. And most of us are growing up in single parent homes or step parent homes. You can't tell me that it's, there's some great people out there. There's a lot of cuckolds out there that'll love somebody else's child. But you cannot tell me that the love is the same as when you look in that child's eyes and you know it's yours. I have to believe that there is a much deeper connection. Yeah?
I think it's possible. I think it's very hard.
To love another child as if it's your own?
There's a barrier there. There's a big hurdle you got to jump, which is...
You don't get the biological feedback of seeing my look in your eyes.
Yeah.
You don't get the feedback of seeing your mom and your dad and your child.
Well, and if
you don't get the feedback of seeing the little things that they do that you don't realize are biological.
Yeah. It's you.
That creates this endearing feeling, right? You don't get those cues that are going to endear.
No, and I agree. I don't think that's a superficial. I don't think that's superficial.
What do you mean?
That sense of meaning of looking at your kid and it's your kid. This is your immortality. This is your ancestors not phoning it in for the last 2 million years. This is it means something. And I don't think that's, regardless of what the sexual marketplace is saying, the phenomenon of having your own child, that's not cheap. And what are we,
It's a really good one. That's not cheap. I mean, no.
But we treat it like it's cheap. And we tell women it's cheap. You're cheap.
And there's a lot of men out there that treat it like it's cheap because they just gave up.
Yeah, you're cheap.
They just gave up.
You're cheap for making your child your career. That's sadistic. That's sadistic, if you ask me.
I think it's sad. It's sad that so many women have been just the bankers are happy, is all I want to say. The bankers are happy. Because here's the other thing. Do that generation over generation. The children, sooner or later, those generations become much more pliable. They've got a hole in them. They don't know who they are. They're much more malleable because they don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of self that comes from that generation. They don't have that sense of self that comes from having a strong family. They don't have that sense of self because the world is telling them who they are instead of their family saying, I don't care what the world says, this is who you are. This is where you belong. This is where we come from. This is who we are. And you don't have that, and now you've got TV and everybody else telling them who they are. And that's not really who they are. Anyway, hey, I hope y'all enjoyed the episode. I know we're random and we kind of go, and that's partially intentional, right? We're just common people having conversations. We're not like super educated. We're not like super researched or anything. We're not super professional. We're not like doing a crap ton of research. It's just two people with regular brains looking at the world through regular eyes as regular people. I'm not a high value man. I'm 48 years old, no kids. I promise you, I don't put my value in a bank account. So I'm not a high value man in that Kevin Samuels traditional sense of the modern sexual marketplace. Luckily, I look good. But so I mean, sexual marketplace ain't been too bad though, cousin Chet. But at the same time, right, like we're just regular people. Like part of my goal for these podcasts is to have these conversations with regular people. We don't need professors and everybody else to tell us what's going on. We're allowed to think for ourselves and to figure it out for ourselves. And we're allowed to be wrong, and we're allowed to be tangential, and we're allowed to be disorganized in our thoughts. But these are one of the most fundamental ways that humans have taught each other and learned from each other throughout time is social learning. Not sitting down, reading a book. It's from sitting down and talking to your elders, talking to your cousins, talking to your aunts and uncles, talking to your people, right? And so, for those of you that are watching, especially if you've gotten this far, you've been watching for an hour and 11 minutes and 38, 39, 40, 41 seconds. Thank you. Thank you very much. See you next time. Deuces.